Hey everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. Got a box of carbs here from Charlie. They're HDCs. He's included quite a explanation of everything. I've briefly perused it. Long and the short of it, number one, which is what we're going to look at first here. Got the saw to pop with three poles on full choke, with 1.5 on open on the low, idle high. Moved the choke to midpoint, popped again, tried to run, removed the choke, started, ran rough, goosed it to the point a few times. At that point, I thought it was off to the races. Then she stalled, got her to run right away, giving her throttle. She died. Idle was way too high advanced as the clutch was engaged, so I had to keep my finger on the okay. After each time she died, I took the muffler off and had a little standing gas and wet sidewalls each time. Pulled it a few times with the kill switch off and proceeded to turn it to run. She would start up but die if I did not keep my finger on the throttle. Okay, well, we'll just go through it. There's no guarantee that that is the carburetor or a carburation issue, of course, but we'll start there. So one thing, they've all had kits put in them already. So that is good. We'll just get into this. I'm going to grab a fresh work surface here. So that we can see what it is we're doing. And we'll just do some HDC carb doctrine again. I've got a ton of videos out there already with carb stuff on them. But, yeah, we'll start on the fuel inlet side. Actually, you know what? I don't want to crack this yet. I want to pressure test it. We'll get a baseline. Where things are at. Now that's holding pressure beautifully. Almost too well. No? Okay. So that's a good start. That all looks good. Very clean. Looks really good. Saw nothing on that side that looks bad. Ouch. That is something you don't want to do. Inlet arm height is just a tiny bit higher than where I would have normally put it. But since it's holding pressure and the right kit is in here, it's just fine. I'm not touching it. I mean, we're talking about less than the width of a paper. The reality is if they don't leak, leave them alone. Okay, now that circuit plate is fighting me. There we go. Gosh, this all looks pretty damn good. We'll do our check valve test. It's gone. There's no check valve in there. Or if there is, it is stuck in the open position. So why does that matter? So you've got fuel that comes in through the fuel barb into the carburetor. You've got, that was not supposed to fall off. You've got this flapper valve right here that's actuated through engine pulse. When that opens, fuel comes in, and then it immediately is trapped in this little cavern, and it goes in this passage and works its way into the filtered area right here. There's the screen. Now there's other, it has a circuit through here. You can see that there's a circuit, built into this plate. Some of those circuits are going to be engine pulse, some of them are going to be fuel. Have I ever traced them out? No. Am I going to in this video? Absolutely not. Don't need to. What you need to know is that fuel has got to work its way from there into here. Okay. The ridges that are built into the cover plate and the shape of this gasket is what allows it to do that. That diaphragm has to be against the carburetor block. Earlier video, the Super EZ, these two were reversed. So those flapper valves couldn't appropriately seal their two holes when they were supposed to. This is the fuel pump side of the carburetor. Couldn't work. If you reverse these, it will not work. Straight up. So that's all you've got to do on this side. If you've got a carburetor, make sure that you can get air or fluid through the barb and out that hole. Make sure that these other various passages right here are not gummed up, but these don't go anywhere but right here. You can push air or carb cleaner, if you're careful not to aim it at your face, through any of these right here. Okay, the net result is fuel is going to get from there to here. This screen will filter the fuel on this side. Coincidentally, that's where the needle goes on the other side. Okay, so those engine pulses are what actuates that arm and needle. Once the fuel reaches this side, the circuit takes over. The fuel metering circuit. So fuel gets its way in here, past the needle. Engine pulse has pulled that diaphragm down. Fuel has come up and in. You got fuel in here. Where does it go? The gasket and the ridges behind here, much like the fuel pump, determine that. Now, I want to clear up, in some of my real early videos, I may have stated something inaccurately. I'm not sure. Charlie sent me an email the other day. Made me think that maybe I had. But I'll clear it up right now. You use the Z-shaped gasket, and on the circuit plate, when I say Z-shaped, there's this passage. You can see the one that I'm talking about. These kits come with two. They come with that Z-shaped one. I should have pulled this out, but... And then they come with that one. Because some use the Z, some don't. How do you know? Most definitive way. How many holes are drilled in the circuit plate? This one has actually got a machining mark where it could have been drilled for 2, but it isn't. You can see it's only drilled for 1. 1 gets the Z. If you've got a second one drilled for the high-speed side, the non-Z. It is as simple as that. I have yet to find a violation of that rule on these carburetors. I have certainly found carburetors where the wrong gasket was used. And when I corrected it, based on what I know there, what I just stated, works great. So again, fuel gets in here, and depending on which circuit is calling for fuel, it is going to work its way through here. It's going to be metered by 1 or 2 screws. This is an earlier carburetor. It has a fixed high-speed jet. So there's nothing you can meter there. The fuel is just going to, as the high-speed circuit calls for it, it's going to pull fuel. It's going to go in and go through this port along with the 3 idle ports. Now the more the throttle opens up, the less those are going to have, well, exclusive use of the air that's rushing through the carb throat. But they're all going to still move a little bit of fuel. That's why when you have multiple needles, it's best to tune your low speed first and then trim your high speed out, because these are always going to flow a little bit of fuel. And if you trim your high, get it perfect, but your idle's not quite right, alter that, you're going to have altered your high speed too. I hope that makes sense. All 4 are going to move some fuel at once at wide open throttle. At a closed throttle, only that first one. As you open it up, showing this on video is probably a pointless thing, but I'm going to try it anyway. You should be able to see just barely 1 hole there. As I open the throttle, if the lighting's not crap, you should see the other 2 appear. So where your throttle plate is determines which hole is going to, or which holes are going to be supplying fuel. Farther open you go, the further back in the carb. At wide open throttle, it's going to primarily be delivering fuel through the high speed, which coincidentally is where this check valve is. So with all that crap out of the way, why does that check valve either being missing or jacked up, whichever it is, why does that matter? Okay. I'm not going to say that I understand this 100%, because I don't. But even on a reed valve engine, I'm going to explain this as best I understand it. Even on a reed valve engine where you've got a reed valve that should be closing, you're going to get a little bit of spit back. There's just going to be a bit of pressure that escapes back through the reed valve and then through the carb. So if you've got the engine trying to draw fuel, but you've got this bit of pressure that's come back, if that works its way into the carburetor and pressurizes this fuel circuit so that fuel's not flowing in, but it's actually being pushed back, that's going to interrupt your delivery, especially on the high speed. With it missing, your idle is going to be consistently jacked up. You can probably get it to run on full speed, very similar to what Charlie was describing for this. But the minute you let off the throttle, it's going to probably die. Because at that point, any back pressure that has managed to make its way into here is going to completely interrupt the flow of fuel. So, I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart. We won't do all of this on video because I'm going to attempt, well, you guys might as well see what I do. I've told you before that I attempt to replace these check valves without using a full check valve kit. I use extra gasket material that I don't use from various kits to cut a new check valve, because these kits are getting harder and harder to find, and it doesn't always work. But if I can salvage it, so I can still see the disc in here. So I don't know what's wrong with this one. I've got the screen out, but you see that spot of black down there? That is that check valve disc. So why is it not sealing? See, now it is. I think there was a piece of junk stuck down in there. Or it had some solvent that managed to glue it in place. Because that's sealing now. And that is not. That was, yeah, that's what it was. Some stale fuel had glued it open. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run some brake cleaner through there, blow everything out really good, and reassemble this carburetor. Because that was stuck open artificially. I've seen these when they're deteriorated, where they're kind of rubbery, gooey, nasty from old fuel. And this one isn't that way. This one's going to be fine, despite the fact it was stuck open initially. So I'm going to clean that out, reassemble this carb. Yeah. We'll reassemble it on camera, I guess. I guess who can have too many HDC videos, but we can go ahead and clean this out, dry it out, and do one more test to make sure that I'm not missing anything. We'll come back. Okay, I am comfortable, completely comfortable that is just fine. Now, you get, the funny part is in the HDC kits, you get the spring or the retainer clip in that screen. You don't get the actual valve and seat. That would be nice. But most of the time you can get this old screen back in and the retainer clip if you just work with it. I've almost, shit. There's no way I can show you guys this because my fingers obliterate the view. But you basically want to set one side in place and then just work the other one down. There you go. Nothing magical to it. Okay. That is it. There is nothing else wrong in this carburetor. And that's one of those cases where I have to wonder if a little bit, one more try, you know, had been enough. I don't know. Whatever was gumming that up might have been really significant. Hard to say without actually seeing it. Why is that sitting so high? There we go. So, you hear about carburetors with hidden passages where you can't get to something, and how an ultrasonic cleaner might be the only answer. And there may be instances of that, but these kind of carbs, these older ones, that's not the case. I showed you guys all the passages in there. They're all visible. And if one did happen to get gummed up, it would be easy enough to use a small strand of wire to clean it up, because you'd be able to see both ends. And I've seen some of these that get pretty gummy, but at this point, I'm not sure I've had an HDC I couldn't put back into service. Okay. Alright. Let's pressure test again. She was rock solid before. She's still rock solid. Let's see if she goes together without creating an issue. Come on. Yeah. We're going to be good to go here. Okay. So I'm not going to go through each carb in full detail like this, only if I come across something that'll add value to this video. Otherwise we'll just wrap up at the end. So I'll go through each one. If I find one that needs a check valve replacement, we'll definitely do that. But I'll just have to get into them and see where we're at. Alright, this one's showing the same kind of symptoms. This check valve is either stuck open. Oops, I just ruined the screen. That's the one risk to trying to get it out like this, is that you're going to ruin the screen. In this particular case, I did. Come on, you little piece of crap. You're destroyed. Get the hell out of there. And once again, the disc that's in there doesn't look bad. So what's happening with these things? Now that one's definitely not sealing. Definitely not. It's leaking more than I like. Okay. So we're going to try and pop that seed out. Successfully popping that seed out without destroying it is about a 50-50 proposition from what I've found so far. If I don't find the tool that I want, it's going to be a 0% proposition. Alright. So what I've got is an old nail setting tool that I've abused the poop out of, but it has a ridge around there, and that's really important because I use that ridge to try and get under this. And there, popped it out. There's crap built up in here. Alright, this is perfect. There's crap built up on the seat. Wow. Not sure I've seen that before. So here's the underside of that check valve seat. It's just a piece of brass. And then once you pop it out, I like to right then and there remember to tap any damage you've done right back down. Usually it's either going to be not much, or it's going to be so much that you can't reuse it. In this this case, it was not much. That should seal just fine. So now you can see the disc still laying in there, and then you can see the crap I'm talking about. There's debris right up in there. And what is it? And I can't tell you. I don't know what that is. But I'm going to guess it's stale caramelized fuel. It was holding one edge of that check valve completely open. So in a case like this, would the brake clean have been enough? And the answer is, I don't know. I'm still finding little chunkers of this. So I'm going to spray it out, blow it out. We'll come back. Okay, so that's all those pieces are. And the answer to that question is yes, brake clean dissolved that crap right up. So I would recommend that before taking this apart. I can tell you, you don't get very many tries at this. You might pop this out once. If you get one time to reuse that seat, you're gonna be doing good. This one, I believe we lucked out and is fine. But I won't know for certain until I test it. And again, if the check valve kits were more readily available at a good price, sure, you just replace it all the time. But we'd get into a situation where people would be replacing this and it would be falsely diagnosed a lot. Just like the carb gets blamed for a lot of stuff, and it's not always the carb. It is a lot of the time, I'll freely admit that. But not all the time. This little retainer ring can be a bastard, especially when it comes up and shoots you like it just did. And lands to the floor. Oh, yeah. I don't know how I managed to see that. I almost had it where it needed to be, too. The last second, that little fart came out. Okay. There we go. Okay. I think that'll do. Moment of truth. Okay, we got it. So, now you've seen the elusive removal of that seat and reuse of it. Now, had that check valve been bad, I would have gone and gotten my 3/16 punch, an extra piece of gasket material, punched a new one, put it in there, and then driven that seat back in. There's no more to it than that. So, again, I'm going to go back off camera, put this thing back together, and we'll see if anything else funny comes up. Okay, so in summary, we ended up putting a new check valve disc itself in number 2. Number 2? God, I'm losing track now. It was number 3. It was number 3. Number 2 we reassembled after cleaning all the garbage out. Worked fine. Number 3, the disc actually was brittle. It was the black material, and some of that black material, when it's allowed to sit in stale fuel long enough, will turn into this. I mean, it's almost like breaking a potato chip. That's how that one was. So I cut a new one out of the synthetic extra material from like an SDC kit. And if you've ever worked with those, you know those have a number of different gaskets in them that you don't use on every carburetor, so I saved those to cut these little check valves. Number 4, needed nothing. Number 5 is interesting. He's got that labeled as a backup carb, no kit installed, which means it's got the original gaskets, diaphragms. It was never allowed to go bad. Perfectly fine. Check valve worked fine. All the gaskets, diaphragms are still pliable. Came apart easy, went together easy, holds pressure. So there's something to be said for a carb that actually hasn't been abused. So anyway, Charlie, these ought to all be ready to rock and roll. Get those back to you soon. Yeah, in terms of overall HDC stuff, hopefully this takes a little more mystery out, brings the video back up to the top of the list of HDC stuff for guys to look at. They're a common carburetor, they're pretty easy to work on. They do have their quirks, you know, that check valve being one of them, and what it'll do in terms of runnability. You've got to experience it, but anytime you're doing a rebuild, do that quick test. Just do it. The little hose right over the valve, seal it down tight, suck and blow. You ought to be able to blow air through. You shouldn't be able to suck much back up. If you can, you got a problem. So anyway, hopefully this will help you guys out. We'll catch you on the next one.